Okay, guys, just wanted to hop on here and give you an update as interest rates are starting to rise now and on what's going on in the market. And then it'll give you a little bit of help in a logical way. I mean, this is not investment advice, but I'm putting this because this deals with logic and reason and dealing with some pretty standardized um, devices for assessing what's going on in any given market. And yeah, I think you'll get some value out of it. So let's do that. So this is the American 10-year Treasury, which I mentioned in my last video is synonymous with the way interest rates are going to work in general, as it was. This chart represents from 71, which is when they went off the gold standard. So what do we have here? Markets move in 5 waves in any given direction. This is the Elliott wave principle, and it's fairly standard operating practice in any market in micro and macro time frames. This is the macro, dealing a period over 60 years. So back after we had the high in 81, we then went in the opposite direction and been going that direction ever since. So 1, 2. The third wave is always the longest and most protracted. So we have 3, which bottomed out here at 0.36, just at the beginning of the pandemic. And so essentially we're going to be rising up to number 4. So what does number 4 mean? Well, I'm looking at, this is again something I've said in the past called the Fibonacci time expansion. Like anything that can be measured with a pattern can move in what's called Fibonacci time extensions and sequences. And so you have here, I'm drawing the initial measurement of this thing. I'm drawing back to what was the low in 1971 all the way up to the high in 1981. That's basically a 10-year period. And then you see the expansion therein through time. It's not perfect, but there's a few things that are going on at the same time that I think are worth paying attention to. And so, yeah, again, do your own diligence. But this is, I'm very convicted that this is exactly what's going to be unfolding very, very shortly. So 3 was the bottom here in the beginning of the pandemic, and this is the trend line here. These black lines represent the trend line. So you see, this draws from this point to this point to this point. You basically want to get 3 what's called touches to establish a trend, and then we can clone that and put it up here, and so we also get 3 touches. 1, 2. We're looking for the third touch, and I'm going to speculate that the third touch is going to be in the beginning of 2025. The American election is November 2024, November 5th, and let's pretend it's contested again, as was done last time, so it takes a while for it to shake out. But at that point, interest rates will have risen all the way up to 5% on the American 10-year Treasury, which from a mortgage rate perspective, you're going to see mortgage rates at about 7%, which will eviscerate most people that are in mortgages right now, especially if they're in a variable rate mortgage. So to see how quickly that can go up, you can see how quickly. So for example, from 76 all the way up to 81, or even quicker. How about from 1980 to 81, we had a rise from 9 all the way up to 16. So it didn't, almost a double. So that having a really quick rise, especially in regard to an inflationary environment, which is in 71 to 81, they had a huge inflationary environment, and that's what we're entering into. As the mainstream media is, of course, broadcasting that, and so technically it's not always the reverse, but there's enough. When they talk about certain things going on, like they talked about the pandemic. Doesn't matter if you believe the pandemic is real or not. The point is, it was the critical mass of that. That was the energy moving through society. So anyway, I'm fairly certain you're going to see a situation where we're going to see this high rate we had right here back in, when was this high? Hang on one sec. this high was in 2018. So essentially what we're going to see here is we're going to see a high come up to here. It's going to jerk around for a bit. It's possible it's going to come down here and touch this Fibonacci wave radial. And I think we're just going to have, it's going to basically just crawl up this line all the way till we get till, all the way till we get to 2020, the first part of 2025. So essentially you'll have the American government, you'll have the new government in place, and they'll, of course, the economy will be in a bad way, and they will want to do whatever is possible to support the economy. And so I think you're going to see a very radical measure where they are going to just begin to slash interest rates very quickly. And we're going to be going back to that 0% that I told you about before. And to show you how fast interest rates can come off, I mean, if you look here, this is 84 all the way to the bottom in 86. In a 2-year period, interest rates went from 14% all the way down to 7%. So that was a halving as well. So I'm fairly certain that we'll be visiting that 0%. Will we visit it here? I don't know. We also have to keep the 2030 on the radar as far as the prophecy concerning the resurgence of the CB and the pandemic virus, a virus of some kind, associated with Sylvia Browne's prophecy. Which, again, remember, she was very accurate in regard to touting the year and the kind that the COVID was initially. So I'll give her some credence. But yeah, going down to the 0%, and I think things are going to be so bad that they're going to go beyond 0%. They're going to go to negative interest rates, which, as I mentioned to you before, is going to be like what the Bank of Japan did. So essentially, just to recap, up here, down here, crawling up to here, and then just more or less a collapse somewhere here. This is around the, that'll be in the first 2 years of the next president. And so essentially what that means is that right around here, leading up to the presidential election, there's going to be a lot of people losing their homes. But a great time to buy, if you're going to buy a house, a great time to buy will be in 2024. In the spring of 2025 will be a great time to buy a house if you're going to buy one. Valuations likely will be cut in half, and if you plan to, if you kept your powder dry and you want to stay in the country, that will be a great time to exit. Because then you're going to see, the crazy valuations we have recently here, $1 million and all that kind of stuff. You're going to see houses go ballistic, because when interest rates go to 0, there's an argument people could say it's going to be devious, but deviousness sometimes just happens by accident. So what I mean by that is that when interest rates go to 0, it's going to be very hard to, initially everyone will be clamoring in to get houses, etc. There'll be government programs, all kinds of stuff. But there will be a situation where a lot of commercial buying will, like banks will actually own houses. And they'll just, like, we're entering what's called like the feudal system, basically, where you have where you have property in the hands of very, very few. And those of you who have property, they make it hard for you to hold on to it, vis-a-vis taxes and your ability to earn income. So that's important to know as well. And of course, the currency will be collapsing as well, because as far as buying power, because as you're seeing right now with Russia and the BRICS nations, they're going to be trading amongst themselves, and the only thing we have to sell is debt. We do have some natural resources. That's why Canada's currency is doing better than America, so we'll continue to do better as well. But because America is our largest trading partner, they'll force us to deal with them from a sanctionary standpoint. And we'll get into price controls and all kinds of bullshit. So bottom line is that if you want to consider exiting Canada, the best time to exit will be about 2 years after the election. That's when you'll probably get your most value for your home and get some kind of monetary return. And then I can't tell you how long the socialist thing is going to last, but it will last in Canada for at least a decade. And, property ownership may, as we enter this phase here, property ownership may just cease to exist from in a traditional standpoint. Although, it's the illusion of ownership, although it'll be largely socialist. So like I said, look to, so once again, if you want to exiting by about 2020, later 2026, 2027, you get the maximum value for your house in conjunction with the value of the currency. And then after that, you're going to be in it for the long haul. So you'll have to decide if that's something you want to do. And most of you will, and that's fine. More frogs get boiled than crawl out of the pot. It's just the way it is. So, I hope this helps. If anybody has any questions specifically about how this is all determined, we're also looking at this. This is a major floor here at this 5.5%. This is a floor. In this case, it's a major ceiling. You see, it was a floor here. It was a floor. It was a floor in 71. It was a floor in 93, 95, 99, 2000, and then all of a sudden the floor became the ceiling. Once it punched through that floor became the ceiling. So I'm sure you're fairly certain we're going to be revisiting that. And and you know what? Just to give you an indication of this is just a forecast that I'm making here. But if for some reason it does punch above this trend line in a significant way and hold up here, well, shit, all bets are off, because then, we could be looking at getting to an interest rate of, 10%. I could see that happening. Could it happen then? I'm sure. But I'm fairly certain that once we hit this part here, we hit this floor, because as I said, you notice we hit this floor here, that it goes up quite a ways. It's easier for this market to go back down than it is for it to go up, because there'll be so much frustration and general bedlam in the economy. And, it's not something to be worried about. Just, I'm telling you this so you can be prepared. If you own your house, great. If you're happy where you live, great. But, there'll be just things in society that'll be generally hard. It'll be generally harder to make a living. It'll be generally, in traditional ways. There's always, if you're smart and you can position yourself in a way that the economy needs what you do, that's great. But that's as it pertains to real estate, which is, people's number one asset, right? So, interesting times ahead, and, position yourself accordingly so you can take advantage of these things, either staying, let's face it, if you're in a position to buy in 2025, the year they part, and you get a bunch of stuff, and you find the right people who rent, maybe you'll have some income that way. But it's always interesting to see in a socialist environment how the government will deal with things like income and things like property and the taxation you'll be paid. Because again, in the Soviet Union, or most most communist socialist type regimes, they just simply, they commandeer your businesses and property in the name of the goodness of the state. And it's not nefarious. It's just they think they're doing the right thing, but it's never worked. But they think that this time will be different. Well, this time it won't be different. So there it is. Thanks, folks.